The Urantia book says men and women are variants of the same species. So we're never going to understand each other. And we really have to harmonize our differences, and actually they're complementary and they actually help us.
Once I had my own children, it gave me an understanding of God's love for me as well. Until one is in the parental role, you don't understand how the parent loves.
Joyce and David bring a wealth of professional and personal experience to this discussion. Both are seasoned attorneys and dedicated students of the Urantia book. They've been actively engaged in study groups and various charitable organizations for decades. I'd like to add, Joyce is a second-generation reader whose parents discovered the Urantia book while serving as missionaries in Africa.
That's quite a story.
Hearts out to Ralph and Betty.
Joyce is currently serving as secretary of the Urantia Association of the United States, and Dave is the teacher facilitator with Urantia Book International School, UBIS. They're passionate about sharing their insights on the vital role of marriage in society. They'll explore the history, evolution, and purpose of the marriage relationship between a man and a woman, emphasizing the partnership aspect, including duties, obligations, and the importance of parenting.
In addition to their professional achievements, Joyce and David are avid runners, clocking over 500 miles a year. And they share love of gardening, cooking, and of course, spending quality time with their family and friends.
So join us now as we delve into what the Urantia book reveals about marriage and gain some valuable insight on what makes a marriage successful. Joyce and David?
We want to start by thanking the person who provided the backgrounds for each of our presentation slides, including the delightful couple you're now seeing. We want to thank Francine Fortin. Our topic today is marriage. What a partnership. As we will discuss, this purely human partnership has given rise to the family, all social evolution, and our ability to co-create future cosmic citizens. The Urantia book tells us that Jesus exalted marriage as the most ideal and highest of all human relationships.
The Urantia book also tells us that marriage is the mother of all human institutions, for it leads directly to home founding and home maintenance, which is the structural basis of society. The family is man's greatest purely human achievement. And as a culture, we are aware of this. As Jane Austen wrote over 200 years ago, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
In the next 30 minutes, we'll discuss marriage, its history and importance, home, family, and parenting, marriage as a partnership, and close on what makes a good marriage. The history of marriage revolves around the mating instinct, the heart, and property interests.
The story of the evolution of marriage is simply the history of sex control through the pressure of social, religious, and civil restrictions. No human emotion or impulse, when unbridled and overindulged, can produce so much harm and sorrow as this powerful sex urge. Think of Lancelot and Guinevere, or Helen of Troy, or plenty of examples from our own political history. Let's look at the hearth. No direct biologic urge led man into marriage, much less held him in. It was not love that made marriage attractive to man, but food hunger, which first attracted savage man to woman and the primitive shelter shared by her children. So my grandmother was right. The way to a man's heart really is through his stomach.
Woman thus became indispensable, not so much because of the fleeting sex passion, as in consequence of food requirement. She was an essential partner in self-maintenance. She was a food provider, a beast of burden, and a companion who would stand great abuse without violent resentment. And in addition to all these desirable traits, she was an ever-present means of sex gratification. Joyce, has anything changed? Woman is still an essential partner, and she's a food provider. In fact, today she's a breadwinner, but is she still a beast of burden?
Well, think of a mother carrying a car seat, a heavy diaper bag, and a child.
Is woman still a companion who will stand great abuse without violent resentment?
Well, our mores have changed. We don't expect either partner to withstand physical or emotional abuse. They shouldn't have to. And today, they have the option to leave.
It says that she was an ever-present means of sex gratification. Do you think it's more nuanced than that today?
Yes, I do.
Primitive marriage was more a matter of business than an affair of flirtation. The ancients married for the welfare of the group, wherefore their marriages were planned and arranged by their parents and elders.
Woman started out as the property of her father, who transferred his title to her husband. And all legalized sex relations grew out of these pre-existent property rights. The Old Testament deals with women as a form of property, as chattel. The Quran teaches their inferiority. We'll turn now to the importance of marriage, and we'll cover 4 topics. We'll see how it promoted racial survival. We'll learn why it is the basis of all social evolution. We'll examine it as a tool to regulate and control, and we'll look at its impact on individual happiness.
The function of marriage and evolution is the insurance of race survival. Those races which exalted and practiced marriage evolved to higher levels and survived in increased numbers. Family life slowly and surely developed because sex and marriage regulation favored the survival of the tribe itself by ensuring the survival of larger numbers of children. Marriage is the basis of all social evolution. Marriage has given mankind the home, and the home is the crowning glory of the whole long and arduous evolutionary struggle. The family is the master civilizer. A child learns most of the essentials of life from his family and the neighbors. The takeaway here is that it's the family, and not religious, social, or educational institutions, that principally teach our children the essentials of life. Almost everything of lasting value in civilization has its roots in the family.
How is marriage a societal tool? Well, the Urantia book tells us it is a tool to regulate and control human sexuality. As an institution, marriage regulates personal sex relations, descent, inheritance, succession, and social order. And I would note that these factors apply across all marriages, including same-sex marriages.
Turning now to individual happiness. From my earliest memories at 4 or 5, my deepest desire was to grow up, fall in love, get married, and parent children. I envisioned my someday wife as my closest friend, life companion, and full partner, an essential component of my life. In some respects, I viewed life as beginning at marriage, all else being preparatory.
You know, it's interesting, Dave, that so many novels end with marriage, but in real life, the marriage is the beginning of your life together.
Turning to Joyce. Joyce always wanted someday to be the mommy. So she watched her mother carefully. She prepared for the mommy job and to someday run a household. As good a lawyer as Joyce is, I can tell you, she's an even better wife and mother. Happiness starts at home. On the other hand, getting married didn't make me happy. I was already happy. I was happy as a child, teenager, and unmarried adult. No doubt I'd be reasonably happy today if I had never married. But marriage did make a critical difference in my life. Marriage enabled me to do and experience so much more than if I had remained unmarried. Marriage gave me a life partner to share with, home building and parenting opportunities, and a sense of belonging and purpose. In a very real sense, marriage and children help define me.
Monogamy makes pair marriage possible. The Urantia book tells us that monogamy always has been, now is, and forever will be the idealistic goal of human sex evolution. A woman can never be an ideal mother when she must engage in rivalry for her husband's affections. Think of the court intrigues of the Ottoman Turks or the Ming Dynasty of China. Woman always wanted the individual family, and eventually she had her way.
We'll now turn to the home, family, and parenting. We'll start with Jesus' teachings. We'll then talk about home and family, touch on parenting, and then close with religion. Jesus' teachings on marriage. As we noted earlier, Jesus exalted marriage as the most ideal and highest of all human relationships. In Jesus' words, marriage is to be desired by all men. It is the divine will that men and women should find their highest service and consequent joy in the establishment of homes for the reception and training of children, in the creation of whom these parents become co-partners with the makers of heaven and earth.
As we turn to home and family, remember that marriage is the ancestor and creator of civilization's most useful and sublime institution, the home. Society itself is the aggregation of family units. Individuals are very temporary as planetary factors. Each of us spends only a short time on this planet. Only families are continuing agencies in social evolution. The family is the channel through which the river of culture and knowledge flows from one generation to another. Think of the lessons you learned from your grandparents, or the lessons you've imparted to your children or grandchildren. The ancients loved their children, but modern man loves his grandchildren. The family is the fundamental unit in which parents and children learn patience, altruism, tolerance, and forbearance, which are essential to the realization of brotherhood among all men. It is only within a family that we experience the brotherhood and sisterhood relationship, first in our human family, by birth and marriage, and as a part of the family of God. It was through my marriage to Dave that I acquired 3 wonderful sisters.
Parenting. A true family, a good family, reveals to the parents the attitude of the Creator to his children, while at the same time, such parents portray to their children the first of a long series of descending disclosures of the love of their Heavenly Father.
Dave, do you remember when we first came home from the hospital with Will, and I said to you, now I know how much my parents love me?
I do. The Urantia book notes that children who used to be an asset have become economic liabilities, but then warns that the security of civilization itself still rests on the growing willingness of one generation to invest in the welfare of the next and future generations, and further warns that any attempt to shift parental responsibility to state or church will prove suicidal to the welfare and advancement of civilization.
Parenting entails the supreme responsibility of human existence. It is nothing less than creating and educating future cosmic citizens, sons and daughters of God. It is a supremely important job with ramifications that extend beyond this planet to paradise and beyond. Let's discuss how religion can enhance parenting. The Urantia book tells us that few modern homes match Jesus' home in Galilee, for parenting. Why? Well, the Urantia book suggests that the reason is that religion is missing from most modern homes. The love life of a wise home and the loyal devotion of true religion exert a profound reciprocal influence upon each other. Such a home life enhances religion, and genuine religion always glorifies the home.
Turning to marriage as a partnership, we'll discuss three topics. First, that marriage is ideally an equal partnership. It didn't start out equal, and we'll talk about marriage today. On marriage being an equal partnership, Jesus led the way with his proclamation of equality. Upon gaining sovereignty of his local universe, Christ Michael published to the world the fact of the Spirit's equality with him. And this becomes the transcendent pattern, the high ideal for the human institution of voluntary marriage.
As we noted earlier, on Urantia, marriage didn't start out equal. The modern idea of sex equality is not found in nature. When might is right, man lords it over woman. When more justice, peace, and fairness prevail, she gradually emerges from slavery and obscurity. Among the more advanced races, women are not so large or so strong as women. Look at us. Dave's a foot taller and weighs 50% more. Woman being the weaker, therefore became the more tactful. Man was woman's superior on the battlefield and in the hunt, but at home, woman has usually outgeneraled even the most primitive of men.
Speaking of primitive men and being outgeneraled, I was in the Air Force when we got married. At our wedding, my best man, Bob Lowry, in his toast noted, "Dave is a major. He doesn't know it yet, but he's come up in the world. He's married a general." Bob nailed that one.
And I will note that Bob was the son of an Air Force general officer. Woman has always been treated more or less as property, right up to the publication of this book. Even today, she has not yet gained worldwide freedom from seclusion under man's control. The advancing mores slowly provided increasingly better treatment for women, and those tribes which persisted in cruelty to them did not survive.
Notably, it was science, not religion, that really emancipated woman. Man's physical abilities became no longer vital. Science so changed the conditions of living that manpower was no longer so superior to woman power. Thus, industry won its unconscious and unintended fight for women's social and economic emancipation. Again, evolution succeeded in doing what even revelation failed to accomplish. Yesterday's might makes right society has given way to today's education-dominated society. In the United States, women make up 58% of the college students, 56% of first-year law students, and 55% of first-year medical students. And 50% more women than men earn advanced degrees.
These increased levels of education have led to more balanced relationships between men and women. Women have gained financial independence, equal rights under both law and religion, and on average are better educated than their male counterparts. But the degree of equality in any particular marriage depends on the parties, their wants, their strengths and weaknesses, and their sense of fair play. In an unequal marriage, today the dominant partner may be of either sex. In our experience, and we've seen a lot of marriages, the very best marriages are equal partnerships.
We'll now turn to what makes a good marriage. First, we'll discuss understanding that it's a partnership, and then look at tips for married couples. In a good marriage, first and foremost, you must understand that marriage is a partnership. Unlike parental love, which is unconditional, marital love seemingly comes with some strings attached. Your spouse needs you to be a good partner and pull your own weight, to be kind, considerate, and forgiving. Research shows that where the parties are inconsiderate, the marriage is unlikely to last. Your spouse needs you to be financially responsible, unselfish, trustworthy, and faithful. Your failures, if uncorrected, may not end in divorce, but we do reap what we sow. Stated differently, what goes around comes around.
Over the last couple of months, we've asked about 40 couples what behaviors they thought led to a great marriage. We also spoke with people who are divorced or who have never married. Collectively, they told us, you need to pick the right person and get married for the right reasons. You should remember that a good marriage is more than just two people. And they also shared proven practices. What qualifies someone to be your life partner? Our survey showed that shared values and goals matter most. Marriage is best when based on love, kindness, and sincere friendship. Pick someone you like.
Joyce, my father never offered me advice on women. But when I was 16, he told me, David, marry someone you like. Nobody looks good after a certain age.
You need to know yourself and what you need. If you need a lot of hand-holding, find a hand-holder. If you need time for yourself, find someone who will honor that need. And give yourself a chance. No one is perfect. To expect perfection is to reject all humans because we are all flawed. And don't set arbitrary restrictions as to height, age, hair color, particular profession, or college.
You know, we know people who did, and they never married. Another tip from married couples, get married for the right reasons. The wrong reasons include for sex, to get away from home, for financial support, because you're under pressure to get into marriage, because you have an unwanted child, or out of desperation. There's an old saying, if you marry for money, you'll earn every cent. Marriage can be the biggest opportunity ever, or the biggest trap ever.
Deciding who to marry is perhaps the most important decision you'll make in your life. We know a couple where the man proposed at a family holiday gathering. The woman did not want to marry him, but she didn't want to hurt his feelings in front of his family. He turned out to be an abusive spouse, and the marriage ended in divorce after much heartache.
A good marriage is more than two people. A good marriage involves a third element, a higher reality. A good marriage is much more than an even exchange system. I do this and you do that. God is very much part of the mix, a silent but ever-present partner. For example, I met Joyce at the George Washington University in the law school library. Joyce so immediately captured my attention that I did something that I've never done before or since. I asked a complete stranger to introduce us. Joyce had entered the law school lobby, saw a friend, ran up to him and said, "Stay here, I'll be right back." When she left, I approached and inquired if they were dating. When he said no, I asked if he would introduce me when she came back. To which he replied, "I don't know you." So I explained who I was, and he introduced me. Let's fast forward. A few years after we married, Joyce said that she felt that God had brought us together and asked, "Don't you?" I promptly replied, "No. I think you put 50 guys and 50 girls in a room, and everyone does the best they can. But over the years, my view has changed. God has been such a presence in our marriage that I can't help but believe that He or the social architects brought us together. So, was I prompted by the social architects to ask a total stranger to introduce me? Perhaps not, but I think so. As a number of persons in our survey said, the presence of God as a silent but ever-present partner in one's marriage elevates the marriage. Returning to the topic that a good marriage is more than just two people, it's important to realize that you're marrying not just your spouse, but also into your spouse's family. Upon your marriage, your spouse's family becomes your family. Accept them as family and accord them the same courtesy.
Here are some of the proven practices that people shared with us. And this first one was mentioned by absolutely everyone we spoke with. You need to communicate, and that means both listening and sharing.
Listening is an art. Work on it.
What was that, Dave?
And don't ignore your spouse's bids for attention. A bid for attention is asking you to come and look at something. Come see this amazing sunset. Come check out this photo. Your partner's bids for attention need to remain as important to you after marriage as they were before marriage. If you ignore your spouse's bids for attention, they'll stop coming, and he or she will share with someone else. Also remember that communication is a two-way street. You must share as well as listen.
Mutual trust is also important. Your spouse needs to be able to trust you to do what's right. Commitment to the marriage is essential. You both must really want this to work. And you need to spend time together. We've always eaten meals together, even when the children were quite young and Dave came home from work at 7:30 or 8. We've always vacationed as a family. And 21 years ago, I started running to spend more time with Dave, and we've run together ever since. You need to learn to compromise, and some people find this difficult. And you must forgive. Resentment is a toxic emotion. Humor is always helpful, and this is true for parenting as well. Don't take yourself too seriously. Be kind, be fun. Do little things for each other. For example, taking Dave a cup of hot tea on a cold morning, or his bringing me an afternoon snack of apples and cheese. Make marriage easy for your spouse. And it's important not to allow disagreements to escalate or fester.
Joyce and I have made it our practice never to go to bed angry. And while we don't have to agree, we do need to be nice about disagreeing.
And be sure to manage expectations. Don't expect marriage to eliminate your problems. If anything, it creates more, and the same is true with children. If you had anger problems before marriage, you will after marriage. The problems you or your spouse bring into the marriage will remain. And be sure to value your marriage. Don't take it for granted. A happy marriage is a blessing, not just to you, but to everyone you know.
To review, we've touched on marriage, its history and importance, the home, family, and parenting. Marriage is a partnership, ideally an equal partnership, and what makes a good marriage.
So here is a fundamental fact of life. The real influence which forever safeguards marriage and the resultant family is the simple and innate biologic fact that men and women positively will not live without each other, be they the most primitive savages or the most cultured mortals. So consider this parting question. Can we rise to the evolutionary challenge of making our marriages the partnerships that God intends them to be? Thank you.
Thank you. That was marvelous. Joyce and David, it was fun. Thank you so much.
Okay, with that, we'll get going. Anyone comments on anything that Joyce and Dave had to say?
I have comments.
Oh, of course you do. Of course you have comments.
Yes, I agree with Joyce on the relationship being led. And then it was up to us whether we cemented that relationship. But I have no doubt in my heart that I was led to Bill.
I think Dave mentioned the social architects
Yes,
and engineered this, and I agree with you. I think that they can see potential in relationships, and like as Cher said, it's up to us to fulfill that potential.
And you have both said so many things that are practical and smack on. Are any panelists have anything to say? Ruthie. Hi, Ruthie.
Hi, I'll actually let Brad go first.
Well, yeah,
Well, that was nice.
a lifetime of self-effacement. Is that somewhere in the book? Yeah. So David and Joyce, great presentation. My question is, you mentioned that marriage is a purely human institution. You mentioned that at the start of the talk, but then you mentioned the idea about God being in the marriage or a part of the message. I don't want to misquote you, but can you just talk about your experience of God in your individual relationships and with respect to the marriage?
Want to go first?
Did you see there?
That's a tough question, but yeah, I can. God is kind of always present, and it's not like bells and clocks go off. If there's any moment that particularly strikes out, it's just such an overwhelming presence that eventually, you understand that there's really is something more than the two of you working. There has to be. I mean, it's not that there's so many problems that we overcome or have so much to do. It's just that it seemingly the marriage gets stronger. We're able to do more things and affect more people. We're able to see the production that actually flows from the marriage. And those things really, there's a sense of goodness there that we realize is, we'd like to think is innate in our nature, but it's probably not. It's certainly something that has been helped along. And we've been a great help to each other. And God is certainly someone that we've considered in almost every step and almost everything we've done. So he's a silent partner, and one that allows us a great deal of free will. And
Unfettered free will, clearly.
And even make some errors occasionally. But one who's just a guideline for us. Joyce?
Well, and I guess how I would answer that is to say that when you're both seeking to grow spiritually, you're pointed in the same direction. So you're pretty well aligned to start with. And, that's not to say that people can't have disagreements about religious faith, but, we have discussions, right? Because there are so many challenges in this book, and, there are a lot of ways of looking at things, but we're definitely pointed in the same direction, and that helps you, know what the end goal is. And I think that those shared goals really matter, right? I mean, if you're working towards the same end, you're going to go there together.
And Brad, I never would have read the Urantia book except for Joyce. We got married. She handed me this 2,100-page book, and he asked me to read it. It's small print.
I made him read a little bit of it before we got married. I didn't want him to be completely surprised.
I just knew, but she wanted me to read it. I said, really? She said, really? I said, it's 2,100 pages. And it's fine print.
I can count.
And then I started reading it forward, and I said, I can't understand this. And she said, what is it you understand, David? And I said, well, Joyce, I don't understand the difference between absolute, ultimate, and supreme. And I said, I know what they mean. So I said, there is no difference between the three of them. There's just a new language I have to learn. And, starting out, and then she said, why don't you start with part 4? So I started with part 4, and the rest is history. But, it's moments like this, Brad, that you got to say, I never would have read the Urantia book but for my wife. So, God plays a very important role in bringing people together. And I think in their life missions, you just look at the people on this panel. Chris and Alice, I think, are a great example. And I have no doubt that you and Ruthie are too.
Great, thank you.
Great answer.
I know in our relationship, it's God-centric in everything. I mean, we pull together. We don't always agree, as you pointed out, Dave, but I think that having a spiritual focus and pulling in the right direction allows that cart to move a lot easier. You know, I've been pulling, as your expert points out, been moving in different directions.
Chris.
Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So I have a question for you, David and Joyce, and possibly Bill and Cher would like to comment too, but it's something Alice and I have been floating around throughout the years. Is this idea that the Urantia book, of course, introduces ideas and introduces concepts, but those concepts can evolve and change even beyond what the Urantia book says. And so they introduce this concept of God as our parent, God as our father. But there are other relationships that we have that can also come to symbolize God. And so, whereas as children, the father concept was very meaningful for us, but as we got married, we came to see each other, our spouses, as our relationship with God focused idea that here is this, thought adjuster that's living within and in partnership with my spouse. And so as I interact with her, I'm literally interacting with God. And what am I learning about God through that process? And it's changed kind of how I think about God and how I interact with God. But this isn't from the Urantia book. This is just me and Alice exploring ideas together because we can do that. So I was wondering for you two couples, and Brad and Ruthie as well, perhaps, have you ever thought of that, or what do you think of these ideas?
I have a thought that is not in the Urantia book, but I feel is quite accurate. And that is that God is like, very similar to what you're saying, but I put kind of words to it. The different aspects of God are like our relationships with, like my sister relationship, my mother relationship, my children relationship. Those are all friends. Those are all aspects of God and different kinds of relationships. That's just my experience.
And I would like to throw in there, since we're on this side of the thing, is that the father concept of God in my family, that was not a really, that didn't bring great memories to bear. And I knew what the Urantia book talked about when they said God as a father, because I understood the love of my mother.
I think that's a good point, Chris. We don't think of God as our human father. God is love. And I also think it's important. You said something outside the Urantia book. It's important for all of us to recognize that truth didn't originate with the Urantia book. It originated with God. And the Urantia book captures a portion of that truth, a big portion of it. And it certainly greatly elevated my thought and thinking, and will for the whole human race. But the concept of God as a father was the best concept that Jesus could come up with his apostles and disciples. I haven't come up with a better concept, but I do recognize that it goes very well. The parental love is unconditional. And as we pointed out, spousal love really does come with some strings attached. I expect Joyce to do certain things, and Joyce expects me to do certain things. It really is a partnership. But our children aren't part of that partnership. They get unconditional love. So I think the relationship is more accurately a parent-child, whether it's a father-child or whatever. But there's certainly many ways of looking at love, and gosh, you and Alice are great.
Yeah, the idea of aspects of love, right? And I think, Cher, you were referring to that. There are all sorts of permutations on that. But one thing that you find in a marriage between a man and a woman that you don't have in any other grouping is that you can actually create another human being, which is one of the few truly creative things mortals can do, right? I mean, it's a part of me. Our children are a part of me, a part of Dave, but they're their own unique, creatures with their own personalities and thought adjusters. But it's something that you really don't get to do anywhere else. I mean, I can write things, I can grow a garden, but I'm not providing the DNA for it, So that's one aspect to me that, again, until you experience it, you don't really know what it means. And once I had my own children, it gave me an understanding of God's love for me as well, which interesting that, until one is in the parental role, you don't understand how the parent loves, right?
Mhm.
And of course, anyone can be a parent. I mean, I'm not saying you have to have your own biologic children, but when you can produce your own, it's pretty special.
Mhm. And then grandchildren are even a deeper delight.
And if I can finish my thought, Mike, is in the Urantia book, it tells us that you will find your own name for God. And it tells us the name given in different aspects, different sectors of the universe. And I found that my relationship with God is constantly changing. So I'm always trying to find different names or different ways to express myself to God or my expression for God, for that particular relationship at that time. Thank you.
We have I'm sorry, go ahead, Joyce.
Well, I was going to say Ruthie had her hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Unless anyone wants to say anything else, I had a different topic. So,
Go, girl.
well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much, Dave and Joyce. It's really, as you say, a blessing. A good marriage is really a blessing for all those who to be a part of it. And so I don't have any other words other than that. I really feel I got that from watching your presentation and seeing you interact and getting to know you. So thank you. I wondered, there's at one point talking about the reasons for getting married, and I really appreciate that you brought that up because it's a cosmic reality after all. It's our motivations that are the most important in our spiritual growth. And I certainly, on a personal level, resonated with some of the wrong motivation. I forget the exact language you used, but maybe not the highest potentials in motivation. But what I was also thinking is, what papers 82 and 84 show us of how much of an evolutionary journey this has been, and at some point, marriage, people did partner for reasons that we might today in some parts of the world say, that's not a good reason to get married. So that's just something I was curious if you had additional thoughts about, of where you are, given maybe where you were earlier in life or where other people in the world might be, depending on their evolutionary place.
She married me for all my fast sports cars. I have none. I have a sedan.
It's
Good
interesting.
family car.
It's interesting. We look upon evolution, but we are in a continuum. I mean, there are some people who still, see their wives as property or spouses. There are people who marry for a lot of different reasons. It's sort of like Christianity's on an evolutionary spectrum. There's people who are way up here and there's people who are way back there. It's the same thing with marriage. There's people who look upon their marriage now that I married you, I need to control you. Or now that I married you, you're my servant. And there's people on all levels in looking at their marriage relationship. And I hope part of our presentation, part I think the Urantia book tries to do is elevate the marriage, help us evolve to where we should be in our marriages, Ruthie. And there's ideals. It's the Urantia book says basically that men and women are variants of the same species. I know that's in your presentation, which you're going to give. And so we're never going to understand each other. And we really have to harmonize our differences, and actually they're complementary and actually help us. So marriage we're evolving as a species, we're evolving socially, and we're evolving in our marriages, individually and collectively.
And I think those of us in the West at this time have more economic resources, women in particular, than perhaps have ever had before. I mean, there were always very rich women who had more control over their destiny than others. But men and women today can typically support themselves by themselves. And so the choice to marry is really a choice. And, if you really don't want to get married, you don't have to. And yes, there are perhaps downsides, but that's also more of an option today than ever before because we're not so desperate for more population. And so we have freedom that folks before haven't had. If you had 5 children and your wife died in childbirth, you needed a new wife right away because the baby would probably die, and your other children might too, so yes, you could hire servants, but a wife was the best way to go. So you have men who outlived, 3 wives, but that doesn't mean that they weren't good, loving marriages. There were different economic levers there.
Yeah.
And so, choosing to marry because, 2 can live cheaper than 1 isn't necessarily a wrong thing. But again, we have options that a lot of folks don't.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agnes?
Well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And I would like to say that it brought up some emotion in me because I got married at the age of 20 and I loved God very much and I wanted to have children. And so I got married to someone who was very responsible, engaged in many things, but not really engaged in God. And that was my mistake. I think it was a mistake, even though I had 3 children, beautiful children, and I have 7 grandchildren now, and a good relationship with the father of my children and my grandchildren. We meet together, we have parties for the children and all that. So that is good. But God, he was not interested in having God in the relationship. So I do think that that is necessary. I should have at that moment be more, how can I say, well, really involving God automatically. But yes, that was a mistake. So I was very much touched because, family is really an ideal. And I really appreciated in the Urantia book when they said when it doesn't reach that ideal, well, it's better to separate. So that's what I preferred to do. And finding myself with 3 children and alone, because I stayed all the time alone. I didn't want to get involved with somebody else who would have other ideas on education, because I was mistaken the first time. But at the same time, there was that word partnership and couple coming back. So there I did pray God. And I said, well, if that word is always coming back, well, I don't want any partnership with a man, because I had a very bad experience with, I said, which man could be interested in God? Well, then I met Guy. And that's how we met. And for me, it was sure that I needed a partner who had, as you said, Joyce, the same goal in life. And the goal was God. And trying to do God's work. And what is God's work? Well, trying to be a loving person and a serving person. So well, Guy arrived in the family, and we pray a lot together for my children, his children, and the grandchildren. And so it is a partnership. It's a beautiful partnership. Well, it happened later, but what you were sharing and talking about, having a goal and the spiritual goal of serving, that is the most wonderful goal we can achieve in a partnership between a man and a woman. And awaking, and the grandchildren are between the age of 10 and 1 year old, in that range, and they're 7. So we know that they have been all chosen by a thought adjuster, and that we can be facilitators together of the work of their thought adjuster. And so that's the way we can work together. So that's for the family, but we have a an extended family because, as you know, we are facilitators in the UBIS and we work together. And so that is a beautiful partnership. And just like you, we think the social architects were behind that as well. So thank you for your presentation and thank you for all what has been shared here.
Thank you, Agnes. Guy, do you have something to share?
Yes.
What a surprise.
Well, thank you for inviting us. Thank you for the presentation. My take on marriage is a little bit different, and I think the whole idea is to appreciate diversity. I was never married, but I lived with different women, and it's quite a challenge. I'm admirative of people that can stay together 40 years, 50 years. I wonder sometimes if it's more a codependency than true love, but that's kind of a perception. I'm really touched by what Rodin expressed in the Urantia book about marriage. He said that's the ideal partnership, but it failed to produce more spiritual fruit and moral fruit most of the time. Marriage has a strong social connotation. It's quite a word symbol. So for me, what I'm interested is the partnership between a man and a woman. I don't know if we can outgrow marriage, go beyond marriage. I think as we get older. And when I met Agnes, it was clear there was attraction, love, for sure. We're human. And I told her, I say, you will never be first. And she was a little shocked. And I say, I put God first and all the rest follow. So you were talking about the relationship with the Father, that for me, God is the source of everything. And I have a fragment of the source of everything that lives within me. So a fragment of the source of love. So in order for me, for a partnership to work, is you need to put God first and put it in the middle of the relationship and make sure it's active. And we always go back to that element. The other thing is that since we don't have kids together, I'm really appreciative to be a granddad by association. I feel I'm on the probationary nursery. That's quite a gift to see all these little kids evolve and blossom. It's beautiful. It's very touching. And I think when you experience that later in life, it's not the same thing that when there are your own children, because then when there are your own children, you have expectation, you need to put some discipline. So as a grandparents, I feel more closer to God's love as a grandparent than as a parent. The passage that stimulates me the most in the Urantia book about partnership between men and women is that always will these two basic variations of humankind continue to intrigue, stimulate, encourage, and assist each other. It's really important for me to go back to that because we can do other things to one another than that. We can annoy one another. We can do a lot of things that where the diversity is not appreciated and we don't see the complementarity and we don't. So the whole idea is not to be right and make the other one wrong, but to really appreciate another point of view and understand that ours is quite limited and it's a gift to work together. And for me, the partnership in raising kid is beautiful for sure. It's perfect when you can do it. After that, I think serving together is quite a blessing when you have opportunity to bring people closer to God, to the divine presence within them, to accept God's love and to love God and to be transformed by His love and to become more and be more useful to others and get involved in service. And I think that parental love that outside of the family that we have experienced the most for Agnes and me, it's in prison ministry. It was quite something to feel that we were channel of God's love in that place. And it really happened. And we pray, we prepare for it. And we really feel that God was doing the work, that we just had to be there and it was happening. So I think if we stick together in having a common goal, like you said in your presentation, to grow, to progress spiritually, and to serve together, this is the best relationship. It's not easy to maintain, it's challenging, but it's really good.
Yep,
That's
Guy
what
was
I want
speaking.
to share.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Guy. And Guy was speaking of partnerships, and Joyce and Dave, you guys were speaking of equal partnership in a marriage. How do you see that as being superior to like a father-centric relationship or male-centric?
So I always told my children, and I tell it to, young women that I, work with and so forth, you need to be able to support yourself. Because if you can support yourself, then you can demand to be treated the way you should be treated. And you have the freedom to leave if you're in a bad relationship. And I think even more than that, you're less likely to attract those abusive folks who prey on people who can't stand up for themselves. So it protects you in a lot of ways, and not that Dave and I ever had these issues, but the fact is, if I needed to, I can support myself, and I think that confidence, that ability to say, I am not dependent, gives you the ability to say, okay, yeah, I'm not choosing to marry this person because I need to be supported, or I need a home or a car or my college tuition paid. I'm choosing to be with this person because I love him and he loves me and we work well together.
Right, and there's other things on it, equal partnership. And when you get better decisions, Joyce and I have invariably found out that, that Joyce is an excellent decision maker, and I like to think that I'm a good decision maker too. Invariably, decisions we make together are better. And they don't come out like, hey, what do you think? It's more like, I want to do this, and no, I don't think that's a good idea. And well, how about if we do this? And it takes time to work it out a little bit, but we come out with invariably better decisions. The other thing I like about an equal partnership is that both parties are accountable. If there's a decision made, it's not because I made it. If it goes south, and if it goes well, it's not because I made a good decision. And the other thing, I think there's better buy-in. If you don't get passive aggressive behavior, and you get people working together. And also, I think there's true liberty in an equal partnership. I mean, it's equal. And if I'm not there, then Joyce can handle it. I mean, we have partners. We're both equally capable, and we have different capabilities. But it's just liberating to know that I don't have to make all the decisions. Just to give an example, someone approached me one day after we had our first child, and he said, "David, how does it feel to be number 3 in your wife's life?" And I said, "Number 3?" He said, "Yeah, number 3." He said, "The kids are number 1. She's number 2, and you were number 3." He said, "Remember when you were number 1?" I said, "That's why I married her. She has the right values." I said, "Here's the deal. The kids are number 1, okay? And if she's number 2, that's who I want it, because then I don't have to worry about her. I can do the things that I want to do. It frees me up." So this guy's complaining about being number 3 in his wife's life, and I'm saying, hallelujah. That's exactly right. So there's an equal partnership.
Yeah.
That's cute. Thank you both very much. We have a question coming up from the audience here, which is, how does one respond spiritually to broken trust or infidelity?
We don't
really know.
We don't know.
Um,
But you have to remember that the person, I think you have to start with whenever you have a dispute, the person you married is a really good person. And that's what you have to start with and focus on. And it may be, you remember I talked about those bids for attention? It may be that you ignored your partner's bids for attention and they quit coming. And so she quit sharing. And so now she's sharing with somebody else. And it falls. There's lots of reasons for infidelity. We just never, it's been a blessing that we've never had to deal with that.
I think understanding, right, the reasons, because there's always enough blame to go around. So, I mean, if you take something much smaller, like just a disagreement over, I don't know, a project and someone forgot something or whatever it is, you know, you work through, well, okay, do we still have to do this? How do we get it done? You know, and, you know, yes, I'm sure there are things that would be unforgivable, I'm sure. But one does need to forgive a lot of things. I'm not talking about forgiving abuse, but
Yes.
you know, and everyone gets to make their own choices. I mean, there are people who are serial, you know, have serial affairs and the marriage still works. So I wouldn't presume to substitute my, you know, judgment for that.
Mhm.
But, you know, people work together, they find out what works for them. People can forgive a lot.
And as Joyce said earlier in her presentation, you know, the problems you bring into your marriage, after you marry, you still have them. So if you're a woman and you find some tomcat attractive, guess what?
Yeah.
He's a tomcat after you married him. All right. And that's a problem. And
It's an interesting perspective.
it's true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Brad and Ruthie.
We haven't had to deal with those issues in our marriage either, but one thing that's such a gift from the Urantia book, I think, is it gives us an enlarged perspective on the full history of humanity, the changing folkways, and you mentioned mores in your presentation or earlier this morning. You could just see that over time, you know, things that are sexual taboos, they have a lot of energy around them, particularly in the Judeo-Christian tradition. You can maybe see them more for what they are. It doesn't excuse a breach of trust, but it may give you a philosophic framework to work through them because someone had a great failing, a great ethical failing and a breach of trust. And I think that strengthens the potential, the way to work through it.
I think the question was specifically, how do you deal spiritually? So that, you know, I just want to acknowledge there's still the other question of however we handle this personally. You know, Jesus taught us, you forgive and you forgive and you forgive and you forgive. But I think he's talking about, you know, a personal relationship, not necessarily perpetuating a system that's dysfunctional. And so, yeah, I have to wonder that maybe depends on just each person. What was the agreement they made? And yeah, what are the terms when that's broken? I don't know, but I appreciate.
You know, we have a comment from Hara in the audience, which is this is neat. It says, if you love the person, it's an amazing chance to show forgiveness.
It's a hard way though.
You guys depicted dancing in your slides. How's marriage like a dance for you?
Well, so little
This would be
backstory, I
fun.
was in a ballet company for many years. And we've also done some ballroom dance. But if you think of partnering, right, you each have your own steps and you're supporting each other. And, you know, if one person lets the other one down, you might stumble or fall, but you can, if one person stumbles, the other person can grab them, right? So it's a complicated sort of maneuver where you're trying to support each other, trying to help each other out. And, you know, maybe the dance isn't going very well. And maybe you need to pick, you know, switch from the waltz to the tango. But so you have to be open to changing how things work, I think. And that's one of the ways I look at it.
Well, that's great. That's great. And so very true. I think it just need to be flexible. You know, compromise. These are I know when Sharon and I dance, literally when we dance, she had to compromise. She always wanted to lead.
You know, life is like music. Life is music. And we dance to the music together, you know, couples, married couples, arm in arm, and then apart, then close together, but always in parallel. So, you know, we're not individuals anymore.
Mhm.
We go through life, move through life together, move through life together in parallel. And so much like a dance.
Hopefully with the same rhythm, close enough.
Building on
Together.
Sometimes we draw apart, sometimes we're close together, but always in parallel as we move through life.
Bill and I like to think of ourselves as one really good whole person because we fit together our personalities so well that we would make one good person. And that's what our partnership is about, trying to make that happen.
And maybe that goes along with what you said, Key, is some form of codependence, but that's okay. I like it.
Think of the pattern on into the universes, right? Complementary.
Yes, exactly, exactly. It's about Guy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with the 7 habits of highly effective people. And he talks about interdependence, that first you need to be independent in order to achieve that. It's quite a challenge. Like you said in your presentation, you need to marry the right person and marry for the right reason and be both independent. So this is a lot of growth, self-growth to come to that place and to keep that alive. You know, in his book, he talks about 1 + 1 equal 3 in interdependence. Jesus talked about 1 + 1 equal 4. So because you invite God in the picture. So it's a work in progress. We're all work in progress. We're all humble ascending mortal, doing our best to grow correctly and act correctly. Sometimes we fail. You know, loyalty is, if you remember in paper 39, they say, first you need to be loyal. So infidelity, you know, it's okay, you forgive, you don't need to go bunker and kill your husband or your wife, but if something like that happen, usually there's something way deeper behind. There's a reason for it. So, and it's good to understand the reason. And obviously, if you hold grudges, you hurt yourself first. So it's good to forgive, and at the same time, loyalty is the foundation of trust, and without trust, you cannot do much.
You're so right, Guy. There's you know, what came up in the last session, there was a lot of talk on how important spirituality is in your life. And Joyce and Dave, you guys have brought that up in your slide also. We talked about on government on a neighboring planet, how, you know, how the spirituality was the responsibility of the family. How do you guys see a better way or a good way to introduce more spirituality into the family?
Or how do you do it?
Or how do you do it?
Well, we found a church that we agreed with, you know, theologically, and we saw to it that they, you know, were part of a community of people who cared about them, who recognized the value of God in their lives, you know, Sunday school, music, all of those things, to make sure that they learned about God. And, you know, to the extent you have to correct any theological issues, you know, you can do that easily enough at home, you know. So it was making sure that they understood that there are people of all ages who, you know, care for them and that they're part of that family of God.
And, you know, you talk about marrying into your spouse's family, but also, you know, the church becomes part of your family, just like the Urantia group communities become part of our family. And it's important to have roots. Joyce, for example, Joyce was our church choir director for 17 years.
Youth choir.
Choir. And now she's on the consistory. So there's many things that you can do it. But I found out, it's kind of interesting. All my friends who weren't churched, and what I mean by church, they could go to the synagogue, or if they weren't given a faith community as children, taught early, invariably, there are some exceptions I hear from the Urantia circles, but invariably my friends go to be atheists or agnostics. Their parents believed. They didn't go to church because somebody said something they disagreed with, or it was inconvenient because they like to play golf, or whatever the reason. They didn't demonstrate their loyalty. They really didn't bring God into the family. And as a result, we live in a secular world. Religion's secular. Our newspapers are secular. And so the children grow up without religious roots. And guess what? They don't know God. And to give them the copy of the Urantia book at age 17 is not going to work, in my
Mm.
opinion. So you need to get them, your education is really important. And to talk about religion sometime at the table or maybe in a car, is that like talking about learning to read in a car or in a, you've got to really put some work in. It's not just saying, oh, I'm going to tell you how important it is to read. No, God has to be part of their lives and has to be part of their lives early, in my view. Now, there are people like Paul who were converted on the road to Damascus, but those things are relatively rare.
Oh, thank
Bisous.
you so much. That was delightful.
Thank you.
Panel.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Thanks for joining us.
We picked up a lot today.
Thank you, Agnes and Guy from Belgium, for
Yes.
weighing in.
Bye.
Here we say bisous, bisous.
Bisous, bisous.